Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Let's Talk Astrology. In today's episode, we're going to dive into the macabre as we delineate the charts of notorious serial killers, looking if there are any astrological red flags or propensity for violence and violent crime. Joining us today, we have esteemed forensic astrologer and writer Britanie Leclair, and she'll also be doing a free webinar November 26th on the crimes of passion. So if you would like to join that free webinar, please see the link below this video in the description. So thank you so much, Britanie, for joining us today. And how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Wonderful. Fantastic. So we are diving into the macabre. So obviously a bit of a disclaimer for people. We'll be talking about, quite some gruesome parts and parcels of this. So the first thing we're going to do today in this video is look through couple of natal charts, and then at the end of the video we're going to talk more about your crimes in passion webinar that's coming up. Okie dokie, so let's get into some charts. So everyone, this is the chart of notorious serial killer Ted Bundy, and I think around 25 women he brutally murdered. He would stalk them, and they tended to be highly intelligent, middle class women. I believe he would strike out too, and he was doing this between the period, I think, of 1974 to 1978. So we're going to take a look at his natal chart and look if any astrological red flags when it comes to propensity for violence or committing violent acts. I don't think we can find serial killers per se within a natal chart, but any issues maybe with the lights or different factors that we'll look in today. So Britanie, what are your thoughts when you look at Ted Bundy's natal chart?
Well, obviously, like one of the first things that stands out is the packed fourth house down there. And like, again, if you know a bit about his family history, it's a little, it's confusing, it's messy. Like, for instance, he didn't know his mom was his real mom for a long while. He was raised by his grandparents, and his mom acted as the sister. And he's also said, he's had a lifelong resentment against his mother. And I find that a little bit interesting, especially we have like a pretty tight Moon-Mars conjunction in the fourth house.
Absolutely. And you're saying that packed fourth house, because as you say, and it seems to be a common theme and on all the charts we'll look at today, is either abuse, early abuse, or that element of neglect or separation issues, or in this case, a packed fourth house. There's a lot of confusion, as you say, with his upbringing.
So he was raised by his grandparents, but his mom, I believe, was like a teen mom. She was very young. So when he was born, he always thought like they raised him like his mom was his sister. So there's a weird kind of like sibling thing, which could be represented by, that Chiron in the third with Scorpio too, kind of like those underlying secrets. Again, too, with the Mars connected to the moon, there's like a linkage there with the mom.
And talking about moons, and it's something we'll discuss as we go through other charts as well, it seems the moon aspects to either outer planets or they don't seem to be in comfortable position. So as you say, you've got the malefic conjunct the moon, what we're about 4 degrees out, and then we've got the applying moon to the opposition to Uranus, and of course we have the trine out to Pluto as well. So how would you delineate that, particularly with the soft light? We're talking about the moon being a place where we want to feel nurtured, or how we nurture, or how we want to be nurtured, but it seems this moon is under a lot of pressure in this chart.
Well, especially with Uranus, I almost get like the inconsistent parenting, a lot of being present, not being present, potentially a bit of a fear of abandonment. These people can, of course, become more independent as a result of that, but at the same time, there is like a link to the mother, right, and nurturing in our childhood, which kind of matches up with psychology as well. A lot of psychopaths, and especially serial killers in particular, who go to murder, they have, higher rates of child abuse than the general population.
Right.
So again, that moon and our ability to like nurture and feel empathy and connect with others on that level, if that's stressed, you can see how it can kind of result in perhaps a lack of empathy, or with Saturn potentially like a very defensive kind of placement.
Absolutely. And I noticed, I was curious about declination. So I noticed he has quite, I don't think it's too extreme, but an out of bounds moon. So I think, again, it's just adding to, again, the harsh connections with the moon, but the out of bounds feel. I know Stephen Forrest talks about there's an element of criminality that can come from that in extreme cases. So I thought that was an interesting, and the Mars is quite high in declination too. So once we get to declination, we get planets sort of getting wild and out of bounds or getting close to out of bounds. We have that, I think, that added effect as well, that seems to be. But yeah, you bring in the very important points. We've got that mutable fire, we've got the fixed water. Now, of course, the fixed water, the moon is speaking to Jupiter. So with the mixed reception of Jupiter and moon, really the moon falls in Scorpio, having that connection with, the Sagittarius dispositor pattern. So, there's some, as you said, the concentration of energy as well. It's quite tight. It's quite intense, I would say.
Yeah, we do have like a general mutual reception between Mars and Jupiter as well. So again, whenever we have one of those acting, they're going to be acting together. So we have, that we can say unpredictable, potentially explosive emotional nature, and again, coupled with that Jupiter, which we all know expands and
absolutely. Do you think for the because he was quite brutal in his murder. So do you think maybe the mutual reception, the Jupiter Mars, maybe that excessive use of force which he used against his victims maybe comes into play as well?
Totally. And he also, he has that 8th house ruled by Jupiter. And while, it can reflect potentially the natives' death, I do believe it can also reflect how they go about death also, so
absolutely.
With, Jupiter and Scorpio.
Yeah, exactly. And that Venus is quite interesting as well. So not only is Venus detriment, retrograde, and it's pushing up, it's a little bit wide, but what is that, about 7 degrees square to Pluto as well. So how does Venus speak to you in terms, maybe in terms of relationships with others or women, maybe in specifically?
I mean, well, with Venus, we have relating, the ideas of, connecting with others. With Scorpio, it's going to be intense, very black and white. We add, that square to Pluto. It's almost a double dose of that dark, intense energy. But also, like, for instance, he had the girlfriend that dumped him. And then, he got back together with her years later and just stopped talking to her out of the blue, and she was like, I swear he did that just, to kind of get back
out revenge. It seems like that fixed water, that scorpionic, that as I said, I think the first girlfriend was the same girlfriend who dumped him first, and then he later came back to rekindle it, and then out of this revenge. So I wonder if that Venus Pluto, it's that element of power and control and feeling a lack of that, and now wanting to insert it onto his victims. It's quite interesting looking at the dynamics. And of course, by all accounts, you've got that Venus Mercury conjunction. So by all accounts, he's quite a charming, by all accounts, again, charming, good looking, middle of the road, like the boy next door, kind of American feel. But maybe that Venus Mercury had that charm about him as well, that quite maybe more intense, but more alluring charm, that scorpionic waters, where he would charm his victims. Or didn't he have a sling on him, and he'd go to beaches and he would prey on people's sympathies and try and allure them and be quite confident in that?
Yeah, 100%. And when you do use whole sign, I noticed as well, that would put his Neptune in Libra in the 3rd. So I feel like that also kind of speaks to the charming factor and charisma in a way.
Yeah.
I did notice too, because speaking of it again with that Pisces 8th house, to me, very interesting how, again, we have the 8th house ruled by Pisces, and in a way he played the victim in order to attain his victims. He preyed on their sense of compassion. He was vulnerable and injured, which leads us back to that mutual reception between Jupiter and Mars. Mars conjunct the moon, again, like how he attracted his female victims in order to attack them. Mars.
That's a really excellent point. I think it comes to a point where just because you have an empty house doesn't mean nothing's going on. Check out the ruler, see what's going on. But I think that's an important point. And even to the 7th into relationships. So you've got Saturn there ruling the 7th, detriment, retrograde in the 12th, loosely conjunct Pluto as well. So for me, that relating to others, those seventh house issues are just, they're not seeming too healthy. And when you combine all these factors in together, it just seems to, again, bring up these astrological red flags. I mean, again, you can't look at a chart and go, oh, this person's going to be a serial killer. I have to bring in, environmental factors as well, as you said, psychology. But for me, just some of these red flags that seem to pop up with some of these notorious serial killers. Is that what it speaks to you too well?
Yeah, like I generally will always look at the moon. We're obviously going to want to look at Mars as well because, aggression. So that's kind of innate in the act. I was actually reading Liz Green's book. I love Liz Green. She's so wonderful.
Brilliant.
Where she talks about psychopathy in the chart, and generally, she speaks to almost, I would say, undermodulated sun. She considers, narcissism almost as an ego defense. A way to help you feel better about yourself. So she links that to a weak sun. And again, psychopaths are also known for narcissism, and as well a weak moon. Because again, like that lack of empathy and not feeling for others. So I think again, when you have those hard aspects with those outer planets,
and then the planet's lacking, dignity as well. That kind of makes sense. And I mean, because you've got a very fixed fire Leo rising, you have that bravado as well, maybe that confidence. I think he went to his trial and, lawyered himself up to do that. And then, we've got a lot of this fire, some of the fixed fire, the mutable fire, and then obviously the fixed water as well. So you've got even contradictory kind of elements and modalities in here. And it's just it's a weird blend, but all, as you say, this confidence he still had, but this, in terms of dignity, this propensity to just be a bit out of control, and that lack of dignity, maybe it shows in his chart.
Yeah. And another factor, I mean, he has kind of a minor aspect from Neptune to Mars, but she also mentioned Neptune, Mars, and that's not one I think we usually consider. Like we usually be like, oh, Mars, Pluto, like danger, Mars, Uranus, okay, potential for danger, but Mars, Neptune almost seems softer in a way. But what I found interesting with that was with Mars, Neptune, she mentions there can be a feeling of impotency. So in a way, psychologically, it could be, making someone else impotent, them becoming the victim rather than yourselves. Like kind of, it's like two sides of the same coin. And I thought that was really interesting. So when I looked at these charts, lots of them do have aspects between Mars and Neptune.
It's interesting you brought that up because I was just curious and I looked at his first victim and I was just interested. I didn't do a deep dive, but I was just looking at the transits at the time. And you actually, on his first murder, you had transiting Neptune moving towards his natal Mars. So bringing in that Neptune Mars again as well. I thought that might be an interesting take on that. And I think you had transiting Mars going over his midheaven. So maybe when you start looking into movement, looking at the triggers, or as you point out, that Mars Neptune. So I just thought it was interesting. You had the transiting Neptune towards applying towards his natal Mars with his first victim, recorded victim anyway, was taken. So that is quite an interesting dynamic, as you say.
Yeah, and I was looking at, actually, I said I blend traditional and modern, and I recently finished Chris Brennan's course last year, so I've been using a lot more perfections. And like during his first murder, 1974, it would have been a fourth house perfection year. So again, we have like Scorpio ruled by Mars, and
then you bring that into it, yeah. Because like say, if we bring in the whole sign, it makes the Scorpion energy would be in, Mars would be in the rule of that perfected year. And I believe when he got arrested, I'll have to double check, but was it his 8th house perfected year when he finally got, I think he was imprisoned multiple times, but I think when he finally got caught, it could have been his 8th house perfected year. So yeah, it's very interesting when you start bringing in these other techniques as well.
It was a 5th, but still Jupiter. Yeah.
Oh, was it? Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
I'm just checking my notes here. But what I noticed too, like with the perfection years and the way his, the planets get activated, it really does seem like that Moon-Mars conjunction, when those planets kind of get activated together. And again, in mutual reception with Jupiter is kind of where a lot of the murder comes in. And then the Saturn is very much, it seems like, his punishment kind of times. So
absolutely, yeah.
But Saturn for him would, as a night birth, would traditionally be, the worst malefic in his chart. So I do think that Saturn is like interesting for that purpose.
Very much so. Yeah, it's interesting when we get to the malefics, and of course, I mean, all it seems to me comes back to that Mars moon again, that condition of moon, out of bounds, conjunct to malefic, conjunct Mars. Applying towards the opposition to Uranus and the connection there to Pluto as well. So absolutely fascinating. Okay, so let's go on to, skipped ahead there. So the next chart we have here is the one of John Wayne Gacy. Now, he murdered, I think, up to 30 boys who would come to him as contractors, and he would, brutally, he would play games with them, I think handcuff them, and then ultimately brutally murder them, and then bury them under his floorboards. So again, a very terrible scenes of crime and horrible serial killer. So what are your thoughts when it comes to John Wayne Gacy and his natal chart?
Super Jupiterian. It's Sag rising, then Pisces sun and moon. We have Jupiter playing a huge role in his chart. I also noticed he has 2 mutual receptions because he has Mercury in Pisces with Jupiter in Gemini, and he also has Venus in Aquarius with Saturn in Taurus.
Saturn. Yeah, very interesting.
But with the Jupiter, and again with his 8th house being ruled by the moon, and the moon in the 4th house, and again that strong Jupiterian energy, I did find it very interesting that he did do most of his murders in his home. And when I was reading through the victims, just on a general level, it did seem like the way he lured them and kind of got them in that situation, like he placed himself in like a teacher role in a weird way, like with the one, there was one child, and I guess he was like showing him, explicit sexual material and being like, oh, I'm trying to teach you for when, you have sex with a woman and stuff like that. Like he really placed himself in kind of that, like, oh, I'm just trying to help you kind of
it's important because I think it comes back, if we go back to that mutual reception, that Jupiter Mercury, I mean, both found in their own detriment, but again, you have that mutual reception speaking to one another. And it really, for me, that Jupiter Mercury is the jovial. I think of the clown. I think of that, oh, joyful, I'm going to show you this trick. Hey, put these handcuffs on you, and I'm going to play games. And it just feels, as you're saying, bringing up that Jupiterian energy and then the Mercury as well. But having that in mutual reception, it just speaks to me like jovial clown, like bumbling, pudgy guy, doing it through all these different games and mind games and stuff. It's quite interesting bringing those two together.
And with the Pisces as well, like they said, he performed at like charity events and children's hospitals, and the Pisces, no, that's in 4th house. I was gonna say the Pisces in 5th house, but no. But, I think that really speaks to like that Pisces energy too, in a weird, very weird way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we take the Pisces, if we go whole sign, that'll be 4th. But yeah, you've got all this connection here. And I find it interesting as well. We bring in, if we go back to his, again, his early childhood, like many serial killers or the abusers who become the abused who become the abusers. And I think he was abused by either was it his dad or his stepdad? And he would get beaten. And so very, dysfunctional home life. And I think he would just get beaten for anything. I think he had cookery thrown at him and just, growing up in this element of abuse. But I found it interesting as well with the moon, going back to the moon like we did with Ted Bundy, we have that partile opposition with Neptune in there as well. So again, difficult aspects with these outer planets with the soft light. Again, that moon wanting to be nurtured or wanting to how to be nurtured in conflict again, which seems to be a common theme through these charts. So how does that speak to you?
The moon opposite Neptune, especially with Neptune in the 10th, to me speaks more so to, again, mainly the dad being the issue, and perhaps seeing the mom as helpless or as a victim. But you are definitely like correct. He was abused by his alcoholic father. So again, we have, Pisces sun in 4th. And it is also opposite
Neptune, yeah, the shadow
Pluto,
side. Sorry?
And trine Pluto, I believe. So, there is definitely that abuse factor. For him, I don't know, what would you say about his mom? I don't remember reading like much about her. Like I didn't put anything in
Yeah,
my
I think
notes.
she was quite passive. I think she let the father dominate, and of course many sources of abuse. But as you say, going back to the, it's a new moon, it's sun moon, and the opposition of Neptune as well. And he had issues, I think, with alcohol and family issues, bringing that forth in as well. And then we also take all these planets hovering around the 6th and the 7th against his ascendant. So you have the Mars opposite, like people against you, the Mars against the ascendant. You have the loose conjunction with Uranus, so that erratic Mars behavior as well. And it feels like these people at a young age were against him, or his sense of being his body. He was physically beaten and abused, and of course many times the abused become the abusers. And the Mars is a little wide. I mean, it's moving towards the applying to Jupiter. We certainly have the outer sign conjunction Mars Uranus, maybe that element of extra mix, and you have the Mercury square as well to the what we've got, the Mercury applying Mars square. So just again, these more, it could be destructive or anger issues, or like we had with Ted Bundy with the Mars and Jupiter, excessive force maybe, or just like extreme violence. I don't know if that speaks to you, but I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, I feel like Mars, Uranus, and kind of Pluto in general, tight aspects, to the moon or Mars, or can generally be, kind of warning factors. Here we do have, oh no, that's super wide. I was gonna say Venus opposite that Chiron Pluto, but Venus opposite Chiron is actually a bit interesting to me.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, just these compounding factors. Again, you maybe see as red flags with some of these characters, and again, you take their environment, the abuse they received, and then maybe a predisposition, or maybe not predisposition, but astrological red flags that maybe could indicate times of violence, or wanting to take maybe control of their life. I think one of his quotes he said was that I was born confused. He said to one of the detectives. So I thought that was interesting, that Sun, Moon, Neptune, that the lack of confusion, but again, very brutal. And I think I looked at his declination of his Mars, and it was quite high as well. So I'd be interested to see more studies, if there was more statistics out there where they looked at all these different factors. But again, I noticed this Mars is quite high in terms, quite extreme in terms of declination. So maybe a bit of a wilder Mars as well. So quite interesting. Okay, so we're going to go on to our next one. So the next chart we have got here is that of Alieen Wuronos, and 90% of men are who are the serial killers, but I didn't want to leave out women too. So we do have women serial killers. So Alieen Wuronos, again, come from a very disturbing, very abusive household. I think when her grandmother died, her grandfather kicked her out of the house, and she lived in the woods for a number of years and was living quite feral by all accounts. And she would trade sex for cigarettes and prostitute herself, and all these, very disturbing underlying childhood issues, which again runs through a lot of the charts that we're looking through today. And of course, she eventually, I think, moved to Florida, and her acts of crime were against men, where she would prostitute herself, but then get into the cars, go out into the woods, and then at point blank, very aggressively, would shoot them at point blank range and kill, I think, 7 men in the end. She murdered. So what are your thoughts, Britanie, on Aleen's chart, or any red flags we might see?
I don't know if I'd say red flags, but like there were things that I picked up from her chart while reading her story that, seemed to resonate. But in particular, the Pisces sun, right? When you think of the sun as, our potential to create or to validate identity, and then we have it in Pisces, which can be the archetypal like victim. I thought that was quite interesting, because I do think that's kind of one of the controversies, because I don't think anyone can really know, because she claims, she did it in self-defense. But, she also robbed them. So again, we have that Mars and Capricorn, which I thought was a little bit interesting. And, the Venus and Aries stood out to me with her in that chart, because again, we have the feminine being in the warrior sign.
Absolutely. Yeah, interesting
kind of
dynamics. Like you say, you've got that Sun Jupiter mutual reception. That Mars is angular, is exalted. You know, it's direct. So that's quite a powerful Mars as well in this chart. And I think if we go back to the other charts, didn't we have Ted Bundy with an angular Mars? And was Wayne Gacy? What did he have? Did he have an angular Mars too? Maybe I'll have to flick back. Yeah, well, in the quadrant house system, yeah, angular. So, you know, these angular houses, planets there, they're visible. So maybe their Martian qualities of all these characters, where it comes to violence, is quite visible, I would maybe say, with these angular Marses. And it's interesting. We go back to the moon, which seems to be a common theme through some of these charts we're looking at. We've got the moon in the applying conjunction to Neptune, the element confusion as well, and then the applying square to Uranus. So like with moon issues with Ted Bundy and John Wayne Gacy, you know, moon to Neptune, you've got that erratic, unstable, emotional nature with the square to Uranus. And it just seems like the moon seems to be a common theme that keeps sticking out. What does that say to you?
Like I said, I think it kind of speaks to, I mean, the past, obviously your childhood, your relationship with your mother, your capacity to feel nurturing. In the end, like that all comes back to us as an adult, and how we, you know, I think with every planet and placement, like I believe Glenn Perry calls it undermodulated or overly modulated. You know, for example, like a sun in the 12th would likely be a little bit undermodulated. That ego would be a little bit foggy versus, let's say, someone who has like sun in Leo. But like I said, with perfections and stuff, it's very interesting. Because when I was looking at it, I just find it fascinating. Again, we have that archetype of the victim, Mars in Capricorn, Venus Aries. It just fits her story very well. And actually, for fun, I put the ascendant Lee into the chart, which was the name I guess she used to call herself. And when you use a Cancer rising, that Lee is actually like square the ascendant, and I just thought that was so fascinating. So.
Interesting. Yeah, we'd have to rectify this chart and maybe look at a few factors. But again, you're bringing in that Venus in the warrior sign. Obviously, not too happy detriment, but it was like, I think she got to a point when she was killing these men and just taking the money, and she was like, "I'm going after it, and I'm just going to get it however I want to go." And you got that Mars is certainly out of bounds. I think by at least 20 minutes, I think. So the Mars out of bounds, I'm going to get it. It's angular. It's going to get what it wants. And then that Venus is like, this is what I desire. This is what I'm going to get. I'm going to get it now. I'm going to shoot you at point blank range, and I'm going to take what you've got. And of course, that Venus, it doesn't really show up here. I don't know if it's a bit wide, but you've got is that a T-square? Venus, Uranus, Moon kind of going on. Maybe bring in that Neptune as well. So again, some of these tight aspects, or these harsh aspects, possibly.
100%.
Yeah. So just builds to that. And it's interesting what you say when you look at perfections as well. I think going back, we had Wayne Gacy. I think going back to the Mars as well, like nearly out of bounds. It rules the 12th. You know, his violence led to the hidden bodies underneath his floorboards. And I think when he was arrested, I think it was a 12th house perfected year. So I'm going to have to double check on that as we go through. But yeah, so fascinating. Okay, so our last chart we'll look at today is the infamous Jeffery Dahmer. So what are your thoughts when it comes to Jeffery Dahmer? And for those who don't know, I mean, it's quietly, I think there's a Netflix show on right now, so it's quite a popular serial killer topic at this moment. So he preyed on young men, and he had, again, just would keep body parts like trophies and have these abandonment issues. And you'd see with serial killers as they take trophies of body parts like that, those separation issues, which we seem to see as a common theme through a lot of these serial killers. So Britanie, what are your thoughts for Jeffery Dahmer?
I think what really stands out to me when I look at his chart tends to be Venus as his chart ruler in the 8th house in Taurus. Because again, he seemed very lonely. And when you learn about him, like it was like he just didn't want his victims to leave, which, you know, in a way, it's fear of abandonment.
Yeah.
Which is why he killed them and kept them.
Yeah.
So when we look at Venus, and again, we're relating, and his Venus is relating in this house of sex and death and dark things, but also in like Taurus, which has that bodily, physical aspect to it associated, with possession in a way. But to me, like that sticks out a lot when I look at this chart.
It's interesting because, like I say, you got the chart ruler in the 8th. So Venus, I mean, very strong in terms of condition in rulership, but Venus being in the 8th, applying towards combustion, moving towards that sun as well. So that Venus doesn't seem as easy as maybe it looks at first glance when you look in his rulership. So that's quite interesting. I think you've got what there, the midpoint of Algol as well. So if you take the midpoint of Sun, Venus, got Algol there in the mix as well. So again, it's not the easiest Venus, even though she's quite strong in rulership. So I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, we have Chiron in the 5th, which again can relate to, again, like that, being able to connect with people on a deep level, and even a lack of boundaries. In those kind of romantic situations and relationships. His moon is being ruled by Mars and Aries. So again, we have that strong kind of Martian emotional response being ignited with these topics.
And it seems to be a common theme, again, coming back to that moon. It's not, in that martial quality as well, but you've got the square to Saturn. So again, it seems to be these, when we go back to that feeling of nurturing, maybe go back to his early years, or a lot of these serial killers we're looking at, we're seeing a common theme with a lot of these moon Pluto, moon Uranus, Neptune. Here we've got the moon square Saturn, and it's not getting any help from Saturn. So the mixed reception, moon finds its detriment in Capricorn, and Saturn finds its fall in Aries. So that mixed reception isn't great as well. And then you've got that maybe repressive motions, and then you've got that martial quality. Again, that moon seems to be taking a battering, like it has been in a lot of the charts we're looking at, which I find interesting.
Yeah, and unlike a lot of the other charts had like some kind of mutual receptions. I find his, like, when you look at essential dignity, like he has pretty strong planets. So, if someone was just looking at that, you'd be like, oh, that's great, right? Like his Mars in Aries, Saturn in Capricorn, Mercury in Gemini, Venus in Taurus. Like, there's a lot of rulership, but I think, at the end of the day, it really does come down to aspects, especially the hard aspects to outer planets are going to show themselves strongly, regardless of, I think, let's say the essential dignity of Venus and Taurus.
I think that's an excellent point when it comes to essential dignity, because as you say, maybe at face value, you think, oh, 4 planets in rulership, it's not looking too bad. But when we get to accidental dignity, as you're saying, looking at the aspects, looking at the overall condition of some of these planets, as you take a deeper dive, it's not as easygoing or as strong as you might suspect at first glance. So that's really, I think, an important point when we're looking at the overall condition of the planets. Again, you got Mercury in the 8th, of course, in rulership, but in combustion, I think you've got the square there to Pluto as well. So I think maybe even developing those, dark obsessions, that square to Pluto, extra obsessions, that, as you said before, the abandonment issues, Venus wanting to keep onto these treasures or these trophies of body parts and stuff like that, where, it gets kind of twisted in this sense, a couple of red flags, maybe, so to speak.
Yeah. And like when we look at its moon too, it has a pretty tight square to Saturn, at the base of his chart. Jupiter also square Mars. So again, we have that like strong martial energy coming out.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's so funny that you point out, because again, we're having another theme of Mars Jupiter. So maybe excessive force, and Mars in home sign Aries, cardinal fire. That's another thing that, it seems to pop up as well, that this Jupiter Mars connection, maybe again excessive force, because he was quite brutal, I think, with his victims, and of course he actually met a brutal end himself while he was in prison. I think he was clobbered over the head, I believe, by another inmate. So interesting. And this is another interesting chart when you bring in, if you want to direct by terms or bring in perfections as well, when you saw his year of arrest or when he met his end, all these kind of things. But again, just these moon issues, Mars issues, Venus issues, again, I think when we look at the charts, you can't, again, look at a chart and say, oh, this person's going to be a serial killer. But as we start diving and delineating and just seeing a couple of red flags that maybe add to the overall psychology or the emotional makeup of these characters. And for me, it seems like the moon comes up a lot in these charts. I'd love to see more statistics as well, or more research done into these areas. And actually, speaking of which, I actually found this just yesterday. So I actually picked these charts out of random. So Ted Bundy, a couple of these others, but I never knew this study existed. And it was a final revision, a May 2008 study of 300 serial killers. And what in the abstract, and what they found was factors including mutable signs, or a domination of mutable signs. I think we found that with Ted Bundy, Wayne Gacy, and a few others, looking at 12th house principles. And what stuck at me the most here, where it says the specific moon aspects, and that's literally what we've just been talking about. And in your fantastic article as well on Astro Dentist, you talk about the moon, or harsh aspects. So I actually never knew there was a study out there of 300 serial killers, and I thought it was fascinating when they brought in moon issues as well. So have you seen this one before?
I haven't seen this one, I don't think, but I feel like that mutable thing has been floating around, especially like on social media a lot. And I thought that was interesting, because at the end of the day, I mean, those 4 signs come back to like Jupiter and Mercury. The 12th house kind of makes sense to me, because you kind of have like the subconscious factors.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I just find that funny, like, why the mutables?
It's interesting. I wonder, a part of it may be adaptability. So if you take Ted Bundy, who would go out and he had to dualistic lives, really. They had to pretend to the outside world that they were normal. So whether it was Ted Bundy or Jeffrey Dahmer, had normal jobs, doing what they were doing. So I wonder if there was that ability as a serial killer, maybe to having to adapt to certain situations, maybe put a front on or a face, and then adapt in certain situations when you need to. I mean, that's just a theory. I don't know, but it's interesting when you bring it back to the rulerships as well, coming back to those mutable signs. So I'd be interested to see more studies, or more. I think as astrology as a whole, we need a body of work where we look at large samples or large studies to test some of these theories. What do you think to that?
Totally. I'm a statistics freak. So I love crunching numbers. Actually, when I was looking into this yesterday, the whole mutability thing, I did notice Frank Clifford had made a post. I don't know when it came up in like on my Facebook, but I guess he was friends with an astrologer named Dana Holiday, and she studied a lot of serial killer charts as well. And she had come up with that mutable factor as well. And I guess he hypothesized that there's a link between mutability and the issue of avoidance and repetition. I'm quoting, by the way. It could be said that the function of the mutable signs is to join events, link information, and bind people together, or to make sense of chains of similar events. So serial killers escape detection and repeat similar crimes on a victim, usually one who has something in common with the previous victim. So I was like, okay.
That's interesting. Yeah.
I'm like, that's the best kind of explanation that I think I've found for it. But I think there's something there that could probably be dug into, because it's very interesting.
Yeah, I'd love to see more research. And if anyone who's watching this, if you've got any thoughts yourself, let us know in the comments below. It'd be interesting to hear your thoughts. And I think it's, again, astrology, not just this particular area or topic, but astrology as a whole, I think needs more research and, scientific methods to maybe have more of these articles put together, so we can see maybe some of our theories tested out. So, well, thank you, Britanie, for going through those charts. Again, fascinating. I was reading your fantastic article, and you were talking about the moon issue. So I just thought it was interesting, just bringing up random serial killer charts that we find, the moon issues, we have martial issues with Mars, declination as well. That might be an interesting area of study, where we look at the declination of Mars, or outer bounds moons, or just planets getting a bit wild and just a bit more temperamental maybe. So I'd love to see more studies on that. So the next part we're going to get to now is going to be your webinar, which is going to be, I think, on the 27th of November, and you'll be doing crimes of passion. So do you want to speak more about this particular webinar that's coming up?
Yeah, so we're going to be looking at crimes of passion from a few different lenses. One thing I did discover as I was putting this, kind of all together is that there seems to be, I think, varying definitions of crimes of passion. For instance, a crime of passion in the psychological realm will differ than from the legal realm. Even in common parlance, people use the term a lot when I found that it doesn't necessarily fit these guidelines. So a lot of it is defining, okay, what is a crime of passion? And then we're going to be looking a bit into the psychology of crimes of passion versus, I guess you could say, more cold-blooded killings, because there are differences in terms of even the neurological brain stuff and the things that go on when people are committing these two kinds of crimes.
It's interesting because the distinction we're making today is that obviously today we looked at serial killers, but crimes of passion, I think we're making the distinction here between premeditation with a lot of these serial killers, and then you're talking more about crimes of passion. Is that more out of the blue, sudden moments? There's not really much premeditation involved?
Yeah, generally it would be in the heat of the moment to some kind of emotional provocations. Obviously, one of the classic examples is you walking in and your spouse is sleeping with someone else and you freak out and kill him. Right. That's obviously a lot different than the kind of people we've been looking at today.
Sure. Yeah.
Crimes of passion are actually more common as well. So I think that's something, that should be looked at. And what are the differences astrologically, psychologically? We're gonna have some charts and examples. Yeah, that's about it.
Wonderful. Well, again, I love delving into the macabre, so I very much look forward to that webinar, and I'll be there hosting with you as well. So if anybody watching, if you're interested in signing up, it's a free webinar. See the link below this video in the description, and we have various pop-ups throughout this video. So I'm very much looking forward to that webinar. So thank you so much, Britanie, for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you on the 26th.
Thank you for having me.